What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online, you're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with David Rivenus, who is an international associate for the study of dreams and has been a presenter at their annual international seminars. David lectures and teaches classes and workshops and offers individual dream interpretation sessions via Skype, telephone, or in person. He's also the author of the recently published book, Always Dreaming. Now David lectures and gives workshops on dreams across the USA and throughout Europe and North America. David Rivenus, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Kevin.
No, it's my pleasure to have you on. I was just saying off air there that actually not entirely sure too much on the work, but that's going to probably make it a bit more interesting. Just before we begin, how did you get into dreams? I mean, what was the emphasis? What was the background? What teachings inspired you?
When I was in college, one of the things that I was studying was psychology. And I, as part of an internship, I began working at an outpatient mental health clinic. And this was in the days in the United States before they had a federal program of what to do with, how to teach children with special needs. And so it was really up to each community to deal with this issue. And so there were many of us who then volunteered to go and work with kids who, for one reason or another, were not doing particularly well in a regular school. And so as part of our training on the job, we were encouraged to go to any seminars or any workshops that were related in psychology. And one time a group of Gestalt therapists came into town, and I went to that, and they work a great deal with dreams. And I was absolutely thunderstruck by what I learned from them and the dynamic way in which they dealt with this subject. Before then, it had all been pretty much Sigmund Freud, which I found interesting but limited also in its scope of what a dream might be. And the Gestalt approach was a revelation to me.
Right. Okay. And what was that approach?
Well, basically, what they said was that you are constantly dreaming, and that dreams are speaking to you in a very specific language, and it's a universal language. Dreams speak in the language of metaphor. And so the dreams don't have to learn English or Swahili or Chinese or anything like that. In every culture, their metaphor is a strong component of that. And so the dreams speak to everyone through this language. And it's a language that actually we speak all the time when we are just talking with each other, and we don't even really know about it. I mean, we have expressions constantly that we use, and I'll give some examples here. Oh, gee, that was a tough nut to crack. Well, what that expression really means, it has nothing to do with a fruit that grows off of a tree. It is a concrete image that helps to describe an abstract concept. And that's something we use all the time in our speech. A tough nut to crack means that was a difficult circumstance to overcome or to triumph over. And yet we use these visual images that help bring that more into our own understanding, make it easier. Dreams, that is the language of dreams. We use this language all the time when we speak with each other. The thing is that we're so accustomed to speaking in this way that we then lose track of the fact that, in fact, we are using visual images. They're so common to us. Well, don't be a chicken. Or I have lots of these examples here. I lost my train of thought. These are all metaphors that we use constantly in speech. There are actually literally thousands of them in the English language, for sure. What happens in dreams is that, let's say, we had the expression, we were speaking, and I said to you, oh, Kevin, today I had to step into my boss's shoes. We wouldn't even think about that visually. But if I were to have a dream that involved taking over the responsibilities of my employer, I would actually have a visual image of me stepping into a pair of his shoes. And that's why dream imagery is so strange, so bizarre, because we try to take the images literally, and they're not intended to be taken literally. They're intended to be metaphors. And if you understand them as metaphors, then suddenly they're not so strange. They fall into place and they make a great deal of sense.
So I don't know, then dreaming that you're winning the lottery, for example.
Right. That would be an image about some sort of game that would be, let's say, have something to do with luck. And you would not necessarily, the thing that would be wrong to do would be go spend a whole month's salary down at the lottery buying tickets because you thought this was to be taken literally. And the metaphoric image of winning the lottery means some sort of good luck came to you. And it may not have anything at all to do with money. It may not have anything to do with, with currency, but it would have to do with wealth in a more, well, again, metaphoric sense. Something good is coming to you, and it was somewhat lucky. It was probably not something that you spent months and months earning. So that's the way metaphors work, and that's the way they work in dreams too. Whether they are metaphors that are ones that we find comfortable to pay attention to, or then, of course, in nightmares, then they are not so comfortable to pay attention to.
Okay, so was there any sort of books or any sort of spiritual teachings that really influenced you in the direction that you took with dreams?
Oh, very definitely. And dreams, of course, have been a part of culture since the beginning of the historical record of culture, back to Sumer and Babylonia and the Greek worlds, and certainly in the Old Testament and the New Testament of the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's always been there. It's always been a prominent part of the culture. And I would say mildly all of those teachings have impressed me, but most of my training, especially in dreams, comes from Eastern philosophical teachings. Certainly the Buddhist, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There's a teaching called Ekankar in the United States that, well, to a certain extent in the UK too. And their dreams are very prominent. Hinduism. And I've studied quite a bit of all of these teachings. And what happens when you study these things is that it's fascinating, and yet somehow the teachings tend to make these things more mysterious. And by making them more mysterious, it actually pushes the understanding of them further away. And what I really found so helpful about the Gestalt approach was that it did the opposite. It said, no, I can put this right on your doorstep. I can give this to you in a way that you can understand, and that you can then pass the information on to others. So that was where I began. I was then really taken with a statement that Fritz Perls, who is one of the founders of the Gestalt movement, made in one of his books. And this was a book entitled Gestalt Therapy Verbatim, where basically the entire book is nothing but case studies of various sessions that he's had. And among them, then, there are question and answer sessions at the ends of some of his lectures. And at one point he is asked point blank, can one take the events of one's waking life and treat them exactly as if they were dreams? And he answers, he was very abrupt in how he talked, and he simply said, yeah, just the same. And that's all that was said in this entire book of almost 300 pages. And when I read that, I became really intrigued with this idea. And that's, I think, when my own perspective of dreaming was launched a bit away from some of these other teachings, including Gestalt, because I began to study this phenomenon of what I have then begun to call the waking dream, which is the understanding that dreaming does not stop when we wake up in the morning. The dreaming phenomenon continues. And I'm not talking about really, I'm not talking about daydreams where you let your mind drift and some images come in. I'm talking about things that happen to us when we're going about the normal business of our day, and something startling takes place, or something unusual, something that is in some way disturbing or upsetting, a bit distressing. Automobile encounters are a very common one, although it can really be on having to do with any event that happens in life. But let's say you're driving along on your normal commute to work that you do 5 days a week, and without incident, and suddenly there's a near miss with another vehicle that leaves you just shaking the rest of the day. It has been now my experience, after working with dreams for well over 3 decades, that those are dreams. There is in those experiences the same kind of metaphoric communication that is coming from, well, I could wax eloquent about where it's coming from, but suddenly what you understand is that if you have dreams only at nighttime, you can attribute it to the fact that your subconscious is working and you are inventing all of these symbols, all of these images that come to you in your dreams. But if you acknowledge the fact that this same process goes on when you're awake, and that in so-called real life, you have these encounters that are upsetting or in some way leave you disgruntled or somewhat shaken up and afraid, then your understanding of the dreaming process expands exponentially, because you say, wait a minute, there is nothing about this near miss with this automobile that I created out of my subconscious mind. This is something that happened outside of myself, and somehow life intervened, probably with my own participation, but certainly with something else going on too, that was designed to give me a message. And that's ultimately what dreams are about the message that they have for us. And this goes on 24 hours a day. And that means that we need to re-examine our own relationship to life and how we interact with life, because it's more than just the objective experiences that we have when we go do our grocery shopping or pick up our kids from school or pay our bills or whatever it is that our activity is. There is an entire metaphoric overlay to this this process that we usually don't pay any attention to.
Okay. Right. So, okay. Well, I'm not really with you, but let's try to get with you. So for example, does the incident have to be so negative in a sense? I mean, does it? We use the car incident then, but you also mentioned that it's something that shakes you up. Does it have to be that type of incident that shakes you up?
No. It can be very pleasant. It can be lots of fun. The problem is that unless it shakes you up, the chances are you or I are not going to pay any attention to it. And so it's like a nightmare that you have during sleep. If the dream, let's say you have a dream when you're asleep, and it's all full of lovely images and everything is lightness and fun and so forth. We wake up in the morning and we think, oh my gosh, well that was so pleasant. Gee, I wish every night were like that. And then we go about the business of our day and don't pay any attention to it. On the other hand, if we are confronting monsters at night in our dreams, then the chances are we're going to be fairly shaken up by it in the morning. And we're going to sit there and we're going to ponder it in a way that we wouldn't had the dream been pleasant. The same thing is true with this phenomenon that happens during the day that I call the waking dream, which is that I have lots of examples of waking dreams that are funny or they are, a pleasure. The problem is that that's where our analysis of them stops, because we enjoy the experience so much. Why bother to go into it any further? Whereas if it's unpleasant, then the chances are we are going to sit there and we're going to think about it some more.
So these experiences that potentially are unpleasant that happen to us in the daytime, they're not physically a dream. That's not what you mean, no?
I will answer by saying, yes, you are correct in your assessment, but one then has to take this whole concept of what a dream really is a step further. You are correct that you are wide awake, you're going about the business of your day, and you have a series of what normally we would consider objective experiences. Let's say you didn't have a confrontation with somebody on the road. You end up at work and you greet a colleague with whom you've been working let's say for the last 5 or 10 years, and it's always been very pleasant, and suddenly they lay into you verbally with some accusation or something about which they're disgruntled or unpleasant, and you're totally taken aback by this. This has never happened before. You're wide awake, you're at work, you're not in the middle of anything other than what you do from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock every single day. It's the unusual nature of the experience that is actually begging for an interpretation that is not about, not only about the objective experience of someone being unpleasant to you. There is an overlay of a message that is trying to be delivered to you or to me,
of course,
under those circumstances.
Of course, no, that I can understand, in the sense of, everything's here to not tell us what to do, because then the free will's gone then, but to drive, to give pointers, to suggest, to awaken us maybe to a possibility with our own free will there, that this is what it could mean, or why these deeper things happen. But so just to clear the confusion with anyone and myself, that when we're talking about a waking dream, not a physical dream, even though this reality could all be a dream, yeah. But you've used that analogy in just in this sense because, why have you used that analogy? When it why couldn't you have just said, well, when experiences happen, they happen for a reason, and why call them a waking dream?
Okay, two reasons. The first one is that I see no difference between the images that we collect at night when we're asleep and those experiences that you have talked about just now that happen to us in the day. It's the same process. And I guess I took my terminology actually from indigenous cultures, many of whom say, actually, we have it backwards, that it is during the daytime that we are asleep and dreaming, and it is during the night that we're actually awake. When we think we're dreaming, that's the real experience. And so it was an effort to bridge what we consider a divide. We look at it as, okay, well, there's the nighttime and there's the daytime, and these are two different things going on. And in fact, no, they're not. They're not. They are precisely the same thing. And the second reason that I chose to talk about it as a dream is very specifically, okay, you have one of these experiences that occur during the day or during the night. What do you do with it? And this is where I would say most of us have a hard time, because especially if it's unpleasant or it's unsettling, then we want to look at it and think that it's about to be taken literally. And no, that's not the point at all. And we think that sometimes life is ganging up on us. Well, why I was minding my own business, and why did this guy come along and give me such a hard time at work? No, the issue is that there is an effort at communication. There is an effort at communication by life, by God, by your higher self, whatever terminology you wish to use there. And there is a very specific language that is being used in order to make that communication. And that is the language that I spoke about at the beginning, which is the language of metaphor. If you understand metaphor, then you can decipher these unpleasant things that happen during the daytime quite clearly. And you very often end up, rather than being miffed, being upset with this fellow who gave you such a hard time, you end up thanking him, because he was an instrument through which you then gained some insight about yourself that came in this metaphoric language.
But to come from that space, don't you think that we need to see life from a different perspective? that potentially, there is, we are more than our body. We're, our consciousness is separate in a sense, that we are a soul, and that our higher self, as you just said there, or life, or God, or whatever you want to personify it as. But let's call it our higher self, because that gives us, I think, to call it our higher self, gives the credibility back to us that it's our self messaging ourselves back, in a sense. So it's more empowering. There isn't an outside force trying to help us, it's us. Or you could say all answers lie within us. But anyway, so you need to be able to come from that space to understand these concepts, to understand that that's life talking to you, that it's not, against you, it's actually for you, without trying to tell you the answers. It's still letting you work it out, but with the hints there.
Yes. Totally. There's no way that you can go about life the way you and I used to go about life and still be aware of this phenomenon, because this phenomenon expands the experience of life so much. The only thing, I think it depends on what you mean by higher self, because when you have, okay, I'll give you an example of a waking dream. There was a woman, again, in a car, and we just heard about this the other day. She was driving along, minding her own business, and from a freeway overpass that she then had to go under, a manhole cover somehow came loose and came crashing down and severed the mirror on the side of her car. Fortunately, if it had been 4 inches even over, she'd probably be dead. There was an experience that really shook her up. Now, what was it about her higher self that initiated this very physical incident? And so I think the definition of higher self in this case then gets expanded to include much more of life. Somehow we participate in an overall picture, in something that's a great deal larger, at least than our concepts of ourselves. And that, then I think higher self includes somehow this ability to manipulate the world around us. That's an Eastern adage, you create the world around you. You are only a mirror, or you look at the world and it's only a mirror
Yes.
of yourself. But how that happens, the mechanics of that are really intriguing, and I'm not sure I have an answer to that.
When you include your higher self, what you're actually saying is potentially that if your higher self, this is my understanding of it only, if your higher self is that part of you that's on that side where we came from, if that higher self is all-knowing, it's obviously God. We then have to take responsibility that we are God then, because it's everything is one, which most people do not want to go down that road because it's too empowering. They want to be told what to do, told what to think, and they want it to be separate from them. But if that is the case, then that's the way I would maybe sum up the higher self. So maybe let's call it God is coming through us in a sense to give us these experiences, to test, to bring, to push us, or maybe there's karmic patterns that are happening that's pushing life into the direction that it was supposed to go, or who knows what the bigger picture is. Sometimes it's very daunting, isn't it, to try to say we have all the answers. But I think I do like the idea of giving power back, though, when we use the word higher self.
There's no question that there's a participation. There's no question that we participate in this. And yes, I think you and I are exactly on the same page, which is, yes, this I thing is much bigger than we recognize, and it has a great deal more power. And with it, as you say, comes a great deal more responsibility for taking responsibility for our actions, taking responsibility for our thoughts, taking responsibility for the directions that we take in life. But the wonderful thing about this phenomenon is that it is there not to be against us, but rather to assist us. And within those experiences, and I'm happy to give some examples and how you go about then figuring them out. But within those experiences, there is always the suggestion, as you said earlier, of where to go and how to resolve it. It's been my experience that working with these dreams in this fashion, whether they're waking or sleeping dreams, is that first of all, they present the dreamer with the conflict. And then either implicitly or sometimes very directly, they suggest a solution, a direction in which to go. And then comes the hardest part of all, and that is that we have to follow through with this suggestion. And that's often where it falls apart, because we really, as human beings, don't much like to change.
No. And don't worry, we'll get into the simple 5-step technique and interpreting the dreams and conflicts in just a moment. But before we sort of move on, I just want to stick with this just for a moment, because it's so interesting that this foundation level, in a sense. Well, I say foundation level, it's not really. It's quite involved, because really this is quite powerful what you're saying here. It really is. And when we look at a dream, then, as in the nighttime dreaming, and as you've said, different factions in the world have said that actually that's the true natural state, the dream state. It always seems a bit foggy to me. I mean, right now in this reality, as I'm communicating with you, I'm much more coherent, clearer, aware, remembering of what's been said. Where with a dream, unless it was a really shake-up one, don't really remember them as much. And that, maybe they are as clear as this, yet we just don't remember they are.
I would say that the biggest issue is that we have not bothered to study the language that they communicate in as well. I mean, not even a tiny fraction as much as you and I have studied English. And so we are much more versed in the language that we use during our waking hours than we are during our sleeping hours. But the minute we begin to study the language of metaphor, then suddenly there's a clarity that comes there that not only makes the experiences we have at nighttime clearer, but then there's this overlay of what's going on during our daytime waking hours that gets put on top of what we used to think were these objective experiences of, isn't life such a hassle? Why are these things happening to me? Suddenly there's a clarity that comes there too. Now, many of us don't remember our dreams at night. And I like to say to them, well, now that you understand the waking dream, you no longer have an excuse, because that you will be having as many of these kinds of experiences, profound messages being delivered to you during your waking hours as you have during your sleeping hours. And the second thing to say about that is, if you wish to increase your proficiency of remembering your nighttime dreams, there are techniques for that. And one of the simplest and best is simply to leave a notebook with a pen or a writing utensil next to your bed at night, and just pay attention to that for a few seconds before you drift off to sleep and say, I'd like to try to remember that. You'd be amazed. It may take a little while, a few days, maybe a week even, but you will begin to wake up in the morning remembering things that you formerly had not been remembering.
And it's, you've been studying this for so many years. A great many of the metaphors, and are a lot of the metaphors in your book?
Well, actually, one of the points I make pretty strongly in my book is that even though there are certain metaphors that are archetypical, that are common to all of us, even those metaphors need to be understood with let's see, how can I say this? They need to be understood from the perspective of the experience of the dreamer. Now, let me give you an example of this. Water, or no, here's an even better one. Mother. Okay, mother is that is an archetypical symbol. The mother is the parent who gives us birth. Now that is, there's no variance to that for every single person in the entire world. However, if you were to ask 10 people, tell me about your mother, you would for sure get 10 very distinctive, very different replies. And so even though you have this archetypical symbol, that which, metaphorically, that which has brought us life, okay, but how do you feel about that which brought you life? Well, then it needs to be filtered through your own personal experience of what it's like to have a mother. And was she a nice mother, or was she not such a nice mother? Was she there for you? Was she distant and distracted? All of these things come into play, so that I make a big point in my book of saying, don't go buy one of those books off the grocery shelf that says, here are 1,001 metaphors for dream symbols, because 90% of them are going to be inaccurate and give you the wrong idea. And they're not necessary. You as the dreamer are the only one who really can come up with the symbols and the definitions, the metaphoric definitions of your own symbols. And it's not so difficult to do.
Again, taking self-responsibility.
Well said. Exactly. That's what it's all about. You can't, pay somebody and have them do this for you. Even in the sessions that I have with dreamers, it always comes back to them. I basically, when they come to me, what they're coming to me for is for me to ask them the questions that they really need to ask themselves.
Yeah. I was going to say to you, I think that's where the paradigm of this spiritual shift is going nowadays. I think maybe there used to be a paradigm where it wasn't so much like that, yeah? But nowadays, or very recently, I think the energy is shifting, and I think it really is making each of us our own master. Now, a lot of people will not want to hear that, and they will not embrace that, and it's just, not the right time for them right now. But for some people it is, and I think the more we get that out there, that message, the more empowering, or at least there's a way forward for people. You have to be your own guru. You have to be your own source. You have to know that, what's going on in your life is probably you've already orchestrated it at some deeper level. As you say in your book, whatever you perceive is you.
That's for sure. And I totally agree with you about that you do have to become your own master, your own guru. However, if that sounds threatening to anyone who is listening in, there's lots of help. But it's going to be a different kind of help. You can't go to someone these days and simply pay them and demand that, or just plunk your problem in their lap and expect them to do it for you. It's, as you say, Kevin, it's about you taking on the role of the individual who is going to put things to rights again, who's going to put things back in balance. However, there's lots of help. And a lot of what I do is simply show people how they can help themselves. And it's like, having training wheels on your bicycle as a kid. At first, you're going to need lots of help, and the parent's going to run with you the whole way, and you're going to probably fall off and skin your knee a few times. But as the competence increases, then the parent steps away further and further, and pretty soon you're saying bye, mom and dad, and you're on your own, and you're off doing your own independent trip, literally in this case. And yes, that is what I do. Is one of the things I say at the beginning of classes that I teach in dreaming. If you come away from this series of classes saying, boy, David's really good at this, then I have failed. If you come away saying, I can do this too, then I have done my job.
Now, do you think that... That's the hard part, I suppose, for you, isn't it, as well? And for those attending the class, this isn't easy, but then none of this work is. There's no easy shortcuts here. There really isn't. Because you're really having to actually listen into your into that voice in your head, or that gut feeling, which is again the voice in your head, but it's in the stomach area. That all-knowing, loving side, which only has the love and the answers for you. Now, some people, okay, if it's not in the stomach area, then it's actually a voice, and it may be their higher self talking to them, but it's getting into tune and believing that that's possible.
Yes, that's the first thing. And again, this is where I personally find dreams to be such an assist in this regard, because they're so tangible. You start off with a story, and it's a plot, and often it's bewildering, and often it's confusing, and often it's bizarre, and sometimes even scary. But it's something to grab a hold of. And so you watch this thing which seems so foreign and so alien, I guess is a good word, to you, and you start working it. It's almost like kneading it like bread. You knead the dough, and pretty soon a clarity starts to come to it, and you say, "My God, how could I have known that this was really all about me?" And at that point, Kevin, there's no way that you cannot ask the question, is life really what I thought it was? I think life must be more encompassing and larger in scope than anything I had ever imagined before. Now, that may be as far as you take it, and you may walk away and never broach the subject again. But the fact that you even did that once has changed you, and you can never go back. You can never completely go back to your former way of thinking. And many people then become very enthusiastic. And they say, "Oh my gosh, this was so exciting. Not only exciting, but helpful. I would like to learn to do this better. I would like to be able to become a master of this." And then they are the ones who are willing to sit through some classes and have some coaching and get pretty good at this. Actually, some of them are quite impressive to me. Some of them do it better than I do. So that's
because it's almost like being a medium, but through dreams. We each communicate with that part of us, that God essence, that, like we mentioned before, a higher self, or whatever you want to call it, or even, like I just said, as a mediumistic path, it's using dreams, this work, to get to that next stage. Because some of us, we may not have the mediumistic gifts just developed just to be able to listen in. Some of us may not be able to do creative writing or channeling. We all have different gifts, but for a lot of people that come to you, this is their way in. Maybe their only way in, but it may be that it goes from this to something else. But dreams is definitely a way in to that spiritual side.
I can't agree with you more. It is, not only is it a way in, but it's the one that's the least, if you don't mind me using the term, ooga booga. I mean, there are many who are perhaps not ready to acknowledge even this other side of life, this more expanded view of life. But dreams are a bridge. Everybody has at least one dream at some point in their life, and so you can take this one phenomenon that happens in our lives and say, okay, that's common to us all. And even though I don't really understand very much about the metaphysical, esoteric side of life, this is something that at least I can acknowledge exists. And that's an invaluable door. For somebody who says, I'm clairvoyant, and someone else looks at them and says, yeah, maybe you're nuts too. Whereas you say, well, I have lots of dreams. That's not going to create the same kind of threatening experience as something that is further afield.
Absolutely. And as you say, it's when it is whatever consciousness level that they're at that will resonate with them the most, and this will resonate with the right people. It really will. But I understand exactly what you're saying, and completely agree. Now we was going to talk about as well the 5 simple steps or 5 simple techniques for interpreting these dreams.
The thing that's so neat about it is that it's not complicated. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's not complicated. And I have distilled it into 5 different steps, which are as follows. The first thing you do is you state the dream, you relate the dream. And the second thing you do is you isolate the things that you consider important symbols. Third part is maybe the more it takes more practice, let's put it that way. But usually people get the hang of it, and it's also the most fun, that you take these symbols that you've isolated and you interpret them, you restate them as metaphors. And you understand that, if you see a chicken in your dream, that metaphorically chicken may have something to do with cowardice. And that you have to then look to see what speaks to you as the dreamer the most loudly. So then what you do is you simply restate the dream all over again, the way you did in the first place, except that instead of using the symbols, the words that were your symbols, you use the metaphors that you came up with for the symbols. And then the final step is just to ask yourself, well, how does this relate to what's going on in my life right now? Usually, almost invariably, I should say, there is an issue, there is a conflict going on, or a growth that's occurring that's uncomfortable, to which these things directly relate. And they not only present the issue, but then offer guidance in how to resolve that.
Right. And can you misinterpret the dream as well? Oh, and if so, why would you?
I would say the answer is yes. You can definitely misinterpret a dream. And I would say there are 2 reasons why you would misinterpret a dream. The first one is that, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes it's difficult to bring the dream back to the waking state. And so dreams try to help you with that by using really extreme imagery, really shocking things, and not always, but they are there in our dreams, and usually the most important ones are the ones that are unsettling to us. Well, the biggest danger is taking that literally. My gosh, I dreamed I was in an earthquake, or I dreamed my house was flooded and carried away. Is this going to be prophetic? And I can tell you that 999 times out of 1,000, the answer is no. You have a much greater chance, of something else happening to you than your dream symbols being taken literally. That's the first thing that can go wrong, that can cause a misinterpreted dream. The second thing is someone dictating to you as the dreamer what your dream means. And there is where a lot of people get into trouble by, again, it's this thing you were talking about earlier about taking the responsibility yourself. If you try to give that responsibility to someone else, then you increase the chances of them seeing it from their consciousness rather than from your own consciousness. And it's a communication directly to you. And
this interview's been a real aha moment for me, as Oprah Winfrey would use, because it's just incredible that life is using our dreams to communicate to us in the nighttime, using waking dreams in the daytime, and yet it's not saying this is what you should do. Or this is the way it should go. It's just gently giving pointers and without forcing anything on you. And again, it's making us the guru by doing that. It's giving us the power back, but we just don't realize it's doing that for us sometimes. It's not telling us what to do. It's not like it's manifesting in reality and saying and presenting itself. It's just gentle, little bit by little bit. Nudge here, nudge there.
Back in the 1970s, there was in the U.S. A psychologist named Rogers. I've actually forgotten his first name, but all he did when a patient would come to him would be that they would say, "Well, I'm having a hard time with my husband," and he would repeat it back to them. "You're having a hard time with your husband," and that was what his therapy sessions consisted of, was giving his patients the opportunity to hear themselves back to themselves. And based on that, then very often when they heard it said back to them, they would say, "Well, no, I guess that's not really how I do think about this." It was like a backboard against which they could offer the things that were troubling them the most, and they could see themselves not from inside themselves but from a distance. Dreams do exactly the same thing. They offer you the opportunity to see your conflicts a bit from a distance, not a great distance, just a slight distance, enough that you can see the whole picture. And then almost invariably there is a solution that presents itself from that slight distancing.
Yeah, and it's always got your best interest at heart, which is always coming from love.
Yeah. Always, that's the bottom line. It's always coming from love. And that doesn't, and sometimes it's tough love, but it is nevertheless with your well-being at the core of what it is trying to help you do. It has no desire to give you a hard time. It has no all of this upsetting stuff that often happens either in nighttime dreams or in the waking dream. That's not the point at all. All it's trying to do is get your attention. And once it gets your attention, then there is a message that it wants to deliver. And I've seen this again and again and again. Someone is upset by an image or an incident that has happened to them, and they're shaking or they're disgruntled, or it's been a nightmare that they've had repeated ever since they were small children. And finally they come to me and we work the thing through. And the relief, the profound relief that comes to people who suddenly say, "My God, that's all it was trying to do. And I'm so glad to know that I can now leave all this behind and go on, and not just leave the nightmare, the repeating nightmare behind, but in fact, some issue that began as a child, and then they can let this thing go now and progress on their path to their own guruship, on their path to their own mastership.
I love that. What is your website so that people can get in contact with you? Because you do your work over Skype as well, don't you? Or and by telephone?
I do it by phone and by Skype, in person, however, and I even teach classes via Skype. So if there is a group of people that would like to get together, my website is teacherofdreams.com. So www.teacherofdreams.com, and all the information you need is there. And I'm always happy to help. This is a service for me. I do this just because it's time. It's the thing, as you say, Kevin. It's the thing that's going on now. There's a shift going on, and those of us, either through radio or through dreams or whatever channeling they do, this is my.
There is. I'm sure of it. I'm sure there's a shift going on where it's, and it's scary. This particular one, where I think it's really about self-responsibility, and as you say, and I completely agree with you, being your own guru. But that is not an easy one for people with all the connotations. But I truly believe in my heart that is the way forward, and that's what we should be pushing, because it's the only way. Just before, what would you say then is the most important message of your work?
That there is far less separation between us and life, and between us and others in our life, than we think. In fact, when you start to see that dream symbols occur not only at nighttime, but during the day when we're awake, you suddenly realize that everything you're looking at is you. Whatever you perceive is you. How can you then be at war with it? How can you then be in conflict with this thing out there? There is going to be a motivation to try to resolve the conflicts, because whatever conflict you're experiencing with something outside of yourself is really a conflict within yourself too. So that then introduces again this word love, and that what you're trying to do is then project love rather than anger or despondency or pride or superiority, all of these other things that we get hung up with. The love replaces it, because all you're trying to do is love yourself, and it's simultaneously the most selfless and the most selfish of positions to take, but it's the correct one.
Yes, absolutely, and some religions would say that, but it is as far as we are concerned, it's the correct one, absolutely. Well, it's been this has been an interesting interview actually, and I tell you why as well. It's just gone so quick. So that's it. We're out of time now, but I would just like to say, David Rivenus, thank you so much for joining us today. It really has been enjoyable. Thank you.
And thanks for having me, Kevin. It was really a pleasure for me too.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on The More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.